what needs to be done within the finance team so that we can take the benefit of these tools and still achieve a lot of things, right? We can be much more efficient, we can be much more faster, we can sleep better. During close week, how difficult it is for finance. It could be a forecast close week or it could be an actual close week. People just work for 18 hours just to get things done, month after month. And do we really have to do it in the future? So kind of these questions will be answered.
Hello and welcome to Tech for Finance, where we help finance professionals leverage technology to level up their lives. I'm your host, Adam Shilton, and in this episode we're chatting with Ashok Manthena, founder of ChatFin and an influential voice in the world of AI and finance. With over 10 years of experience in finance analytics, machine learning and product strategy, Ashok is now at the forefront of integrating AI into finance with ChatFin, a conversational AI for finance ERPs. Ashok is also an author and about to release his first book, Supercharged CFO Office with AI. And in his spare time, Ashok also likes to read. He's currently reading The Three-Body Problem, amongst others. But before we start, if you like what you hear today, please make sure to subscribe on your favourite podcast platform and on YouTube. But it's great to have you with us today, Ashok. Thanks for finding the time.
Thank you. By the way, I'm rereading that book, and this is probably my third time or so.
Is it the science fiction one?
It is the science fiction one. So once in a while, I just take the first book again and I start reading, and then you get into it, then you complete with the second and third.
Yeah,
that's how it works. It's a futuristic book which talks about aliens and how humans will react to it. So very interesting topic. Our current problems will look very small once you start reading it.
Yeah, that's it. And I'm not going to try and pronounce the author, but I'll put it in the show notes. But it's a Chinese author, I think, Liu.
It's a Cixin Liu. Yeah.
Cixin Liu, which is Cixin, if anybody wants to look it up. But yeah, I'll put that in the show notes as well. But I've seen, and this is a total tangent, recently I've seen so much in the news, like about UFOs and all of that sort of stuff.
That's right, yeah.
But they've kind of recategorized it, haven't they? And they're not calling it UFO. It's unidentified something. I can't remember what it is, but it's like an unidentified material or something. I can't remember, but they've basically updated the acronym. But yes, it's a bit mind bending. We don't need to go into that whole sort of concept of are we just one big design with some sort of higher level of intelligence in the background? But there's a lot of pretty influential people that do sort of put their heart on that and say, well, it's a definite possibility, but we just don't know, right?
That's right. Yeah. But what I hear from all the people all over the world is, how come all the UFO sightings happen only in US? Right? Not in the rest of the world. So
is it that, maybe there's just much bigger sort of masses of land in the US, more stuff to land on? I don't know.
Well, there are bigger countries as well. So but they still don't see as many UFOs as what people see in the US.
Oh, there we go. Maybe people got too much free time, eh? But anyway, we digress. So, no, I'm very keen to learn more about what you're doing at the moment. I'm sure the audience will be very keen as well. So ChatFin, do you just want to quickly take us through what inspired this and where you're up to at the moment, and then we can just go from there.
So if you think about it, in my experience, what I've seen is at a leadership level, at a CFO level, they want finance teams to be strategic, right? There's no question. Mm-hmm. But finance teams also want to be strategic, but now they have all this business execution, the manual tasks that they're bogged down with. So there's very less time to do strategic. According to one of the survey, 70% of all the tasks that we do is just the business execution in finance. And only 30% and less than 30% is about business insights and the actions that needs to be taken. So now we are building, we want to resolve this. We want to give more time to finance user so that they can be more strategic and less bogged down with the manual tasks. We're taking help of generative AI and bringing that into finance and making sure it understands what we're asking for, and then add intelligence to it. It's not about just the chat feature, right? Chat is just an input tool. It can be a voice as well, but it's about the logic that goes behind where you say, okay, I need this report or I need this specific data in this format. It should come up with the action items that are involved and go execute it. So we're taking help of generative AI to basically resolve these manual tasks that we do in finance.
and it's I mean, I can't keep up. So no, I don't envy you for sort of being on the bleeding edge of all of this technology, right? And without getting too technical, so one of the issues that we often encounter, especially with some of the publicly available stuff, obviously, your ChatGPTs, Bards, and now Llama, which I've been doing a bit on recently, which I found quite interesting,
Right.
is the biggest issue in all of that is the context. So how do we ask a question where the AI is pre-programmed? But I'm guessing, considering that yours is a built for purpose solution, you've already gone through that iteration to say, right, well, because it is trained from a finance perspective, people can just chat to it and it's going to know the financial
Sure.
context, right? Am I
That's
fair in saying that?
right. That's exactly. So all these large language models, of course, they are trained on billions of uh, data points, right? But if you think about the specific data, it might understand some of the accounting, but
Mm-hmm.
does it really understand all the accounting rules that are involved? Does it really understand our domain specific knowledge that we apply, manufacturing versus SaaS company? Or does it really understand a company specific information?
Mm-hmm.
So at that level, right now, the large language models, they can't really perform. So that's
Mm-hmm.
why we're building ChatFin, which is very finance specific. And you can chat with it. You can ask a question. It'll give you. You can even ask, "What's my gross margin for this specific product?" Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it goes. It looks for the data, analyzes the data, and gives you the answer based on your query.
And again, sorry, I know we've got some preset question topics, but sometimes stuff.
It's all right. Go ahead.
So feel free to not answer if we get into sort of sensitive territory or we start talking about any of your IP, which of course you want to protect at all costs, right? But one of the other disadvantages we've been finding with some of the publicly available large language models is they're exactly that. It's language, not numbers, right? So even with some of the more recent iterations of some of these platforms, I guess prior to Code Interpreter in OpenAI world, has been really lacking. So you could ask it a mathematical based question and to perform a calculation, and it would just come back with wrong answers. So how have you got around that? Is it that it'll only produce a result if it knows the data, i.e. if the data already exists in the context, or are you just doing a better job at training it to understand the more complex, mathematical elements of the questions? I don't know whether you can talk about that.
So I'll give you an example. Let's say in finance, you're trying to predict something. You just want to use a very simple regression, linear regression, and then you want to just predict for what's going to happen in the future. If we give this task to a finance user, you know what they'll do? They'll put the data in Excel, use a formula, or we can even manually calculate the linear regression equation and then do the projection, right? Same thing with generative AI. If you ask this question to let's say ChatGPT or a Llama 2, it can give you steps that needs to be done, but it can't really execute on the data. So that is a limitation, right? So what if a large language model can give the steps which involves other models to run? For example, linear regression can be a model that you can run. It's just a formula, or it can be a machine learning model, maybe a little complex XGBoost algorithm. So you don't this generative AI model need not run those other predictive analytics model. All it can do is trigger that model, take that output, and show it to the user. So now what we are making is we are making the LLM talk to other models, giving it ability to execute other models and take the output and do it. So that's, I think, kind of a misunderstanding that when we take is it's this large language model won't be able to do everything, but it can take some of the tools and then execute those tools and get the answers for it.
Yeah. And going back to the point there that you made about sort of the type of analysis that you wanted to do. So you used the example of obviously linear regression, which is just obviously one of many that could be used. And I know maybe we bring some of the latter question matter or question topics further on in this conversation. But and whether it's your tool or another one, is that the aim then that we don't just want these tools to be essentially Q&A bots, we do want to build in sort of that extra level of intelligence that people can say, right, well, not just, give me a calculation of what my gross margin is, but then also, we're almost into FP&A territory, aren't we? If we're starting to move into that, sort of prediction and analysis type territory, is that fair to assume?
Yes, that's right. So it's not going to happen on day one. It's not just us, right? Anyone. Don't expect to get this 100% intelligent co-pilot, which can understand everything about finance. I don't want to predict how much time it takes, but it takes actually multi-step process to get there, even for any company to generate a product like this. It's because first you need to figure out how to get the data, how to understand the user intent, and how to get the data what user wants. It could be in your ERP, it could be in a data warehouse, it can be in an Excel sheet. How can it know that you have that data there? What query to execute and get that data? That's the first step, right? Second step is, what if you ask a next level question? You said, reconcile my data. Now, reconciliation actually involves getting the data, transforming the data in a similar format so that they can be compared, and then you compare the data and say, okay, these are the discrepancies in it. Now, this is a multi-step process, right? This is the second step. So you need to build a large language model that understands what needs to be done to do the reconciliation. This is the second step. Now, if you go for the third step, where we're talking about predictive analytics, is gather the data, which also is a basic task, right? But then transform the data. You can't have zeros in your file. You can't have negative numbers in your file, things like that. You have to do the transformation and then feed it to another predictive analytics model. So now the machine has to understand which model really works well with your data. So it has to use a tool to do it. So now this is a third level. Fourth level is, now we're talking about answering a question in an FP&A sense, right? I always give this example. If you ask a question, why is my gross margin down for this specific customer? And now what it needs is someone goes in there and analyzes the data to give you that answer. The machine needs to do the same thing. It needs to go capture the data, analyze the data, but then also come up with an answer in a humanly understandable answer and give it to you. So these are the few steps that we have to go one by one to reach a point where it can do a lot of our tasks. But even in this process, I think we can reap a lot of benefits. Right now, we still do things manually, like extracting data, transforming data. We can add a lot of intelligence to do it using a chat. So yeah, that's what we're working on.
And I think this is where we are going to see an evolution. And again, you can give your thoughts as well, but take some examples that I've been working on recently. So of course, as soon as ChatGPT Code Interpreter came out, I was all over that, right? Ethan Mollick, I think is how to pronounce his name on LinkedIn. Can't remember whether he's a Harvard professor or something like that. He posts quite regularly on LinkedIn, and I think he was one of the early adopters of that tool, and he was one of the first that was showing the visualizations that you could pull out of it, because that was the first foray into, visuals as opposed to text only, right? So I thought, right, well, how hard can it be? so obviously I opened up Code Interpreter as soon as it was available on the beta version, and I fed it some dummy data, and again, as I always say for anybody listening, if you're using any of the public tools, any of the multi-tenant stuff, anonymize your data. If there's any cause for concern, just don't put data in. If there's a query over whether it's sensitive or not, the rule is just don't do it. So I think I just downloaded some data. I think it was just a Microsoft database. I think it was one of the Power BI sort of default data sets that had some item information, some sales information, some quantity sold information. And I thought, right, well, let's just dump it into Code Interpreter and see what we can do in terms of that next level of predicting. So, what do you believe the unit sales are going to be for this product in this region, for example? Please analyze over the next 12 months. And it became immediately obvious that as much as it was a step up from previous, whereby I believe that Code Interpreter does understand the context a little bit better than just GPT-4 alone, for example, I had to think in a very different way. That's because right. Firstly, the data in the format that was presented wasn't necessarily the best format for the AI to pick it up and immediately understand what the context was, but then how it was going to calculate the end result. So right. I found that within, and I probably spent maybe an hour, 90 minutes on it, within that time, I essentially just ended up with 5 different iterations of a question asking it to rearrange the data into a format that it would be useful and could actually produce the outputs that I'd need. So I think what I would say is people think that, just because we've got these AI tools now doesn't mean that immediately you can start surfacing all of this data. There is still a lot more thought process. And if you don't have the time to train your mind and change that thought process in terms of how you prompt and ask questions, then there are dedicated tools, obviously, like yours, that are going to help facilitate that context without having to go
For
around
sure.
the houses. So I don't know whether you've seen something similar.
Yeah, I think that's the question that comes all the time is particularly from CFOs asking, do we have to train our finance teams on prompting or
Yeah.
on ChatGPT? That's a good question, but the whole idea of using a large language model is anyone can ask a question in just plain English or in any language, right? We don't have to, if you ask a coding question, we don't have to ask something very technical. We can just say something in English and ask that model to convert it into technical. Something very similar with finance as well. My answer has been, I don't think we have to train any of our finance people on prompting. It'll come very natural to us because this is the same language that we speak. It need not be the same language as in English, but it's the same finance language that we speak. That's one, right? Second is, I think the prompting will become more easier eventually. Right now, as you said, there is always a learning curve. For a new technology, there is always a learning curve. That's one. And second, the models will get smarter. They're getting smarter as days goes by. So even if you ask a question in a different way, it'll understand what you're asking for because the same question is asked by probably 100 other people. So it knows what a user actually wants, right? So that's my answer. You don't have to do take a prompting class for now, but there are tools that are like ChatFin that will give you that ability to understand what you're saying and execute the task that is needed.
So I'm going to use my fish analogy here, and bear with me for a second. I think some of the
Sure.
listeners might have heard it before, right? But when I try and explain the whole concept of a large language model, I use a fishing analogy, right? So here in the UK, big fans of fish and chips, obviously.
Yeah.
It's not a national dish. I think curry is actually the national dish for some reason in the UK, but we're all big fans of fish and chips. So a basic or bad prompt might be go and find me a fish.
Right.
Yeah, whereby there could be a potentially infinite number of responses that come out. So right, how do we make that better? Right, well, I want a white fish. Okay, fine. We're narrowing down the potential outputs. Okay, still not quite there. Right, well, find me a white fish that's native to the Pacific. Find me a white fish that's native to the Pacific that's edible. Yeah,
Right.
find me one that tastes really good when you batter it and put it next to you. Do you see what I mean? And for every stage of that, we're getting more and more specific. And that's what we're doing when we're prompting is we're adding more and more context and we're giving more and more guidance to the output. The biggest gap, and I think this is what we're saying that is going to be the next iteration as these different tools evolve, is there is also a fisherman, that wasn't mentioned in any of those examples that I just gave. Yeah. If you look at a fisherman that's been doing it for 30 plus years, they'll immediately know, where to go for the best yield or the most fish. They'll know when not to go out because of the weather, or they'll know when a better time to go out because there's going to be a gut feel or some sort of experience that says that. So I agree that I think we're going to get better and better because the context will come. So we won't need to ask that initial question of where do you want to fish because it already knows where we're fishing. But I think that's where the human element comes in because, essentially what we're saying is experienced finance are kind of similar to experienced fishermen, where there'll always need to be a guide to steer that chain of thought in the right direction. So it's a slightly cheesy analogy, but I think one that makes it a little bit more real.
No, love your fish analogy. It's a very nice way to put this question because if you think about it, eventually the model, whatever you're using, gets your context, right? If it's not ChatGPT, there'll be other model, your personal model that will understand all your preferences. So when Adam asks for a fish, it knows it only needs white, this brand, this thing, this size, and all that. But what if you're using it for the first time? right? It still doesn't have the context. It's the same thing with a human, right? You ask me that question, get me a fish, I will say what kind of fish. So now the model needs to understand what are different fish that are available. Not in the market. Let's say if it is buying it from Amazon as an example, it should know what what are the different kinds of fish that are available there, right? I don't know if Amazon sells fish, but so now it can ask the question back: what kind of fish do you want? Do you just need it for dinner, or do you want it for the whole week? Do you want a white fish? So questions like this, it can make it much more iterative process in terms of asking questions and clarifying what needs. So this way, it can learn more about you and what you want and give the data. This is more of a user interaction as well as a user experience question. That's how we can solve this large language models, getting it more context of what we need and what we like.
Have you heard of Perplexity AI?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. So I had a bit of an experiment with that. Did a newsletter a couple of weeks ago because they are sort of hinting at this whole sort of context type thing.
That's right.
So if you sign up to an account, and again, be careful with your data, there's something called an AI profile on it. I think I've spoken about this before as well, but basically it starts with just a text box, right? Tell us a little bit more about you. And it's quite elegant the way that they've done that, because you can put in, what you search for, your background, all of that sort of stuff that you think might be useful to it. But then it's got like a nice step whereby it will ask you a few more questions, based on what you put in that text box. So at the end of, 5-6 questions, it's got a really good take on where you're coming from. Which I think is going to be sort of the go-to with these sort of narrow AIs like, ChatFin or whatever, whereby there's almost a part of the user journey up front that says, tell me more about your role. It could even be within finance, right? So are you CFO or are you controller? Tell me what your day-to-day looks like to give that initial personalization.
That's right.
But I think the last piece, and forgive me, I've spoken quite a lot, haven't I? I picked up on what you said there. You said clarification, in terms of output. That's the biggest gap that I've seen to people that aren't advanced AI whisperer prompters, whatever you want to call them, in ensuring that the AI doesn't produce results too quickly. And it was like a light bulb when it went on more recently for me, whereby I'd give it an instruction, whether it be ChatGPT, Llama 2, Bard, whatever it happened to be. But at the end, I'd say, before you carry out this task, please clarify that you understand and point out any areas where you would improve the input to increase the output, essentially. So is there anything I've missed that will give you more context that will improve your output, right? And immediately, within 3 points, you've missed this. This will be useful to me. Can you enter it? And within, seconds, you've got a much, much better output than if you just asked a question and expected a result. So I think I'll probably, if people are developing software systems out there like yourself and others, I'd still, whilst I guess some of these LLMs are in their infancy in the grand scheme of things, right? We can talk about ChatGPT-5, whether it will ever exist in the future or not. But it's one of those where if you can build in just a sanity check, clarify what the output needs to be. So I want you to do a bank account reconciliation. Right. Okay. Which bank account? Yeah. When do you need it by? Do you see what I mean? And it makes the interaction a bit more human, but it also means that the responses are better, right? So anyway, that's Adam's brain dump for today.
Now, if you think about it, it's not a very difficult task. Even without large language model, we can build a system like that. Because when you say reconcile my bank accounts, you can always hard code what are the steps that are involved, right? With large language model, of course, it becomes much easier because even if you tweak your words here and there, it can actually understand the context and give you a better response than hard coding something. That's one. Second is at this point, I assume the large language models, like let's say ChatGPT 3 or 3.5 or 4, really understands all the accounting. Because I'm sure it has gone through all the accounting books for now, right? It knows debits, credits, and all the basic transformation transactions that we do. It understands that. But does it really understand the domain-specific knowledge? Because we don't write down domain-specific knowledge. Do we? Do we have, I don't know, have you seen any book that says, okay, let's talk about finance in only manufacturing? or finance and SaaS. There could be, but not very prevalent as what we see. That means the model hasn't gone through a very specific data like that to really understand what it is. And now, if you think about company specific, do we really document all the things that we do in finance? Leave all the other functions, at least in finance. I've seen in big companies, they do desktop procedures. But again, you don't really go and say why you do things and how you do those things. Why is very important, but we don't really capture. We just say, okay, this is how we have been doing. So this is what we need to do. So that context is very important. We don't really capture that as well. So how will the large language models will understand all this context, all the things that are in our human brain right now, but not anywhere in text? So that's a question that needs to be solved in the future. What's the best way to get that data? It's not going to be, okay, I'll just document all this data somewhere and train the model. How can we even document this? Millions of finance analysts using different methods to get their things done. So that's going to be a question for the future.
And I think, and there's we could talk for hours, I'm sure, but I'll try and rein it in a little bit. But so again, you are coming back to what you were saying there in terms of the way that the model is trained. You are limited. I say limited, but you are subject to whatever data the owner of the large language model decided to train it on, right? And let's not forget as well, you mentioned book examples there, and there's probably not a lot of niche industries on at least niche books on finance and manufacturing or finance and SaaS, because they're not as sexy as the broader, more clickbait subject lines. It doesn't make as many sales, does it? Likewise, trying to sort of pin down an academic article that might be difficult for a large language model to understand because it's that dense in terms of content and context. So, you have to be willing to accept that, there is poor quality content and high quality content. And you don't know that when you're asking a large language model a question about finance and manufacturing, that the results is going to produce are good, because if it's just been trained on all of the rubbish data that's maybe sells a marketing spiel off, a ton of websites, it's not going to be useful. And I remember when I first started using Bing Chat, because that was going to be the big thing, web search enabled by AI and all that sort of stuff. And I was trying to get some, and maybe people just tell me that I was prompting wrong, but I was trying to get some usable, actionable stuff that was credible from that search. So find me some resources, i.e. credible resources on this subject matter that I can either present on. And I think I asked for some statistics, I need some tangible facts, some tangible data. And it came back with a reasonable response that was credible. And that's why we need to be careful, because, of course, in the way that it's presented, it's kind of presenting it as fact, right? But there was about 3 or 4 links to web pages in there that were literally selling software tools, and there were no sources to the stats on the website. So it didn't give me the results that I wanted. So again, I suppose it's just for companies to err on the side of caution, especially when it comes to that accuracy piece. But of course, if companies like yours are doing better at training those models and are able to be more selective over the context that's given, that's where we're in the territory of companies picking a narrow AI use case and deciding the best one that fits their business, as opposed to trying to just take on a behemoth of a large language model that doesn't understand context and might just send you around in circles, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So, sorry, it's one of those where I'll start my rant and I'll start talking and I won't stop. So over to you then. So we've been mentioning some books there. So, and I am correct, your book isn't quite released yet. We're the 21st of August right now. So, but it's soon, right?
It's soon. It's with the publisher, and in the last legs of final review. It has been there for a while, but it's going to be released soon. Okay. I'm hoping for it.
So, are you okay to give us a little bit of a teaser? Obviously, I'll put it in the show notes. Is there like a pre-release, or at least somewhere where people can sign up to sort of receive early access, or I can just update the show notes afterwards. But what's the theme? Obviously, supercharged CFO office with AI. Okay, fine. But what was the sort of premise of that? What you're trying to get at with the book, and what can people expect to find in it if they were to pick it up when it's released?
Right. So the whole idea of writing a book is because I've been experimenting a lot with machine learning, generative AI in finance, right? there are more failures than successes, right? And you try to do this and it won't work. It could be your data format issue, it could be your data quality, or it could be there's not enough data available. All this, I want to document this results, right? Because if someone in the future, or if someone currently in parallel wants to try something in this, they should have a reference. I don't want them to do the same mistakes that I have gone through to actually find out. So that's my personal reason to write a book, is to document whatever I've learned in this process, because I don't think a lot many people have worked particularly in predictive analytics and generative AI in finance. So that's why I'm reading it. But the whole idea of that book is to, again, how do we get started? What is the advantage? What are the benefits that we are going to get initially, and how we can ramp up? For example, let's say I have this amazing tool. I want the finance team to use it, and finance team starts to use it. Can they reap 100% benefits on the day one? What are organizational changes that are needed to actually have AI helping us? For example, in the current context, if we just give an AI tool to all the finance users, how they're going to start using it, we don't know. Think about Excel. Did you ever think that Microsoft thought about how Excel is being used by a finance user? No, they thought it's a spreadsheet. It's a different way of looking at data, but now it evolved totally in a different sense, right? How we look at the data. So that's the same thing that will happen with AI. There is a learning curve for each person, for each team, and for the whole industry as in general, to see how we can take this AI tool and use it in our daily tasks, and how we can automate our tasks, how we can outsource, or how we can delegate some of this work to AI and not doing it. Because you know how the human tendency is, right? Human tendency is always to protect what we do, protect what we know. But that's going to change now. It's like you having a very smart assistant. In a company, we know what's that. You'll always have that insecurity. Am I going to be thrown out because I have a very smart assistant? That there will be resistance in finance teams to start using it, or basically in any function. So how we react to it is going to be a big learning curve. It's not about the tool. It's not about how the benefits are. So that's what I'm covering in the book as well, in terms of what needs to be done within the finance team, so that we can take the benefit of these tools and still achieve a lot of things, right? We can be much more efficient. We can be much more faster. We can sleep better. During close week, how difficult it is for finance. It could be a forecast close week, or it could be an actual close week. People just work for 18 hours just to get things done, month after month. And do we really have to do it in the future? So kind of these questions will be answered.
Especially for smaller businesses, I think that are scaling up. Obviously, there are some wins for larger organizations, but in a larger organization, could be assumed that you've got more resource, whether it's more involvement from IT, for example. So when you talk to Christian Martinez, for example, I had him on the podcast. He's at finance automation at Kraft Heinz. So he's got quite a lot of resource, and he's got the infrastructure. So a lot of the topics at the moment are obviously around data protection. How do we get the benefits of AI without the security concerns? One of the answers is, right, we'll just load it into a private server, a private tenant that you own. But especially with smaller businesses, that'll go over a lot of people's heads. So immediately it's thinking, right, well, we're just not going to do it because it's too much effort, right? So I suppose, and I guess forgetting about generative AI for a second, which I know is associated, but when we look at that predictive analytics piece, which of course very much points to that value add, if we can at least get into the point where, we're doing a bit of scenario planning, or we're getting to obviously the meat of what the data is telling us. For businesses that are still sort of, getting the operational stuff right, and then maybe getting a bit more into the swing of sort of regular reporting and an element of analytics, when's the right time to start, going out of your way to start getting on the sort of predictive analytics bandwagon? Is there a good time, or is it either you do or you don't type scenario?
So at this point of time, and in my experience, what I've seen is the data, the quality of data and the size of the data is non-negotiable. So we can still use predictive analytics if you have very less data, but it's same as for human prediction as well, right? If you only have 12 months of data, and you don't even know how the seasonality works, right? With 12 months of data. You don't know if, okay, this summer is good, but I don't know if the next summer will be good. I don't even have that data to even answer that question. So we humans will do it guesswork, and the entrepreneur or the founder will also have that same thing. They'll say, okay, I will assume that it's going to be summer is going to be a good market for us, so I'll go invest in it, and he's going to take that risk. If we use predictive analytics to do it, it will also be as confused as us. It won't know enough data to even predict it. It will predict something, but as humans, we need to know that there's no enough data for even the machine or for human to actually predict something. So that's a non-negotiable. So you need to have high quality data. The high quality data, what I meant is it's clear posting of our journal entries with our chart of accounts. You know how we, particularly in smaller companies, they take shortcuts, right? Small to mid companies, because things get much faster. You don't want to go back, open your book again and do postings, rather than you can just do, like just a generic posting. So things like this won't really help us in capturing good data. So the best thing, what we can start, which I cover in my book as well, is how do we get the data quality right from now? Even before you start thinking about predictive analytics, you need to get your data right. And that is good for, our financial cleanliness as well. Get the data right and start capturing all the data that you have. Don't try to, just delete the data, or because you're changing from one system to another, you just leave it like, oh, maybe I don't need the data. Even if you're a smaller company, data is very valuable. As our data storage costs have reduced multifold in the last few years, it's better to spend that little bit more money and save all the data, because that's going to be a very good the data asset for you to use it in the future. So to answer your question, there is a point where you need at least 3 to 4 years of data, good data, for you to start predictive analytics. You can, again, as I mentioned, you can start a little early as well. If you have daily data, if you have like more transactional, more data, you can always use that. But if you have monthly data, you need more years of it. Daily data is good. And then if you're a SaaS company, you're getting data every day, multiple times every day. That's a good data to have. 4 years is a good time frame. Again, I say 4 years because then you can clearly spot your seasonality within a year. What seasons are working, what is not working, and then you can start using predictive analytics in it.
No, and that's some good advice. And again, I'd maybe feel a podcast round 2 coming up. But on the subject of data, I guess just to re-emphasize your point there, because you mentioned the concept of changing systems, which may mean that you end up with data in, system A and system B that at some point you're going to have to pull together, right? So I guess there's probably an argument to start backing up your data to some sort of data warehouse, as soon as you can, really. So even if the short-term intent isn't to start using any of this clever predictive stuff yet, at least so that you've got the data stored in a logical way. And I guess that doesn't just apply to finance data either. If you have data coming from a CRM or an HR system or whatever, there's an argument to say, get that stored as well. I think, and this is why I say it's maybe a podcast round 2, is the naming conventions of the data from an ERP system, a CRM system, an HR system might be different in their naming conventions. Yeah, and hopefully with the advent of AI, because you've got an intelligence working in the background, it might be able to say, oh, well, this customer terminology here probably relates to this customer terminology here in this data set, right? But I think just keep at the back of your minds that, a customer might not be called a customer in another system, might be called a lead, or it might be called a, whatever, a supplier might not be a supplier in another system. It could be a vendor, depending on what part of the world you're in, right? So, yeah, I think that's a really valid point. There's never a bad time to start gathering data, but to your point, there is a good time to start using it to actually surface some real insights. So thank you for that.
That's right.
Very good. So, last question: how are you doing for time? I appreciate we're 1:45.
Yeah, we can go for another 2-3 minutes, and then we can continue.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. So I've got 2 questions. So one is a bit of an out there question, And then the second one is what I always ask podcast guests in terms of their favorite tech that they couldn't live without. So question one, and it kind of relates to how generative AI is going to change the finance function, but based on what we talked about there, do you ever see a future, and I've been thinking about this quite a lot recently, whereby like the ERP or the finance system is like literally just stripped of everything because we've got data coming from what we know are accurate sources in various places. We don't have to navigate through menus. We don't have to go in and click on journals or click on report or whatever. Is there a future where literally we just log into a chatbot and that's it, and it pulls the data, and we converse in that way? As I say, it was a bit of an out there question, but I'm seeing user interfaces move more that way, so I'd be keen to get your impression of it.
Um, I don't want to predict something, and like how is it Bill Gates or someone said something, and then it still goes viral on Twitter and LinkedIn, right?
Yes.
You don't need like 32 MB of RAM or something like that. But how I see this is, for at least for now,
Yeah.
based on the generative AI insights that I've got working on finance, right, is we still need a database with the rules set in,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is hard coded.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what a software, an ERP provides us. Generative AI can be an interface, and that's how it's going to change finance. Generative AI is not going to change the underlying accounting rules or how it manages database. We can let it do all that database practices as well, but we have already, I think, fine-tuned it, how to build that software, how to build a database, how to build a UI. But as you said, the UI can change. Right now, we have these small boxes where we go click on text or these small buttons and get things done. That could be all changed to chat or just a voice, right? I've seen finance users saying that for me, it's easy to go click a button than typing it there. And it's true. And it happens more often, right? Because as a finance user, we have that muscle memory, how we can quickly go navigate, even we do like VLOOKUPs or pivoting data. We can do pretty fast. But as we move forward, I think it gets much easier. Even the buttons will get much more smarter. Now, each button is not just one action, but it can have a set of actions already have it in that same button, right? So that's how, as a user interface, it's going to change. But at least I feel the ERPs, the software will still exist, and they will provide that value of these hard-coded accounting rules, the whole gamut of things that we have to do, audit function, everything there in the ERP.
And I think we're also heading to the point as well where we can guide the user experience down to personal preferences as well. I think just a very short side story is I recently moved from having an iPhone to a Google Pixel. Yeah, again, people might tell me off for doing that, especially if you're part of the Apple crowd, right? But as silly as it sounds, the biggest, I guess, learning curve in moving to the Pixel is the way that you find your apps, right? Because, I mean, they made it more like an iPhone with the way that you scroll through it, right? So it's still icons on a page and you can choose whatever. But I'm kind of lazy, as I think most people are, especially when you want to get somewhere quickly and you learn your tricks, whether it's a good or a bad learned behavior. So whenever I used to search for an app on my iPhone, I'd pull down with my thumb and then I'd type the first 3 letters of the app, because that was quicker for me than either going into the app menu or scrolling 3 times to get to the app on the page.
That's right.
You can't do that on the Pixel. Yeah, so you have to. Well, at least I've not found a way yet. So you either scroll through your apps or you scroll up, and then all of the apps are alphabetical.
That's right.
And for me, the change from going to 3 typed letters to having to use my brain to think about what letter of the alphabet the app is in has been a big thing for me. But that's user preference. Other people might like that, right? And I know you mentioned earlier that maybe you talk instead of type, because I know a load of people that, unlike me, I write all my notes on a keyboard on a computer because it's just the way that I work. I know a ton of people that do voice memos. Now with AI, they're converting them to text without having to write it down on a piece of paper, right? So I don't know whether you agree that maybe AI is going to help us with that if people do have a different preference, right?
Right. It's like a fluid user interface, right? It can change as per the user preference. That would be great.
Yeah. Fingers crossed, though. We'll have to see. Right. So, on to my last question then, before you can tell people where to find out more about you. So I always ask whether there's an app either in your professional or personal life, and I've mentioned obviously cycling through apps on my phone. So it can be a phone app, it could be a desktop app, it could be like a browser extension or anything like that you couldn't live without. The only app you can't say is Notion, because we've had it so many times. And in terms of gadgets, you can't mention your smartphone because that's a cop out. But are there any apps that you couldn't live without?
I don't have loyalty to any apps at this point of time. Even for my task management, I use Google Tasks, my notes, and all the tasks, right? All the apps, Asana, and everywhere. It depends on the mood of the season. If I'm going from one place to another. But one thing that I really use is I use Twitter a lot. I don't post a lot. Probably I should start posting on Twitter than on LinkedIn. Maybe that gets, and you know what, Twitter started paying all the people who post, right? If you get a lot of engagement, maybe we should target that, you and me.
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe we should. And when you're using Twitter, you said you don't post a lot, but is it just because you find that you get a decent level of content from the people that you follow on there? Or are you following anybody in particular that you get those like quick, short, actionable insights from?
No, so I'm a power user of Twitter in terms of I use Twitter for search, right? Anything that I want very latest material on, or who's the influential person on a specific topic, I'll look it up in Twitter than any of the other platforms. So if there is an insight that I want to get, it's a better place as Twitter than any other platforms at this point of time. So that's how I use the search function a lot. It's not great. It's not really easy to search anything on Twitter, but still you get a lot of good data that you can find. Think about an article, right? Generative AI in finance or something, and then you can just search for it on Twitter and you'll get really good content on it.
That's interesting. I've never done that before because to me, it's always just been about posting in terms of marketing medium, not in terms of learning something. I use Reddit quite a lot, but that use case there, find me a AI in finance article might not be the best use case, so I'll definitely check it out. Okay, cool, excellent. Right, we'll wrap up there, but tell people where they can find out more about you, Ashok. We'll put a link to the book once it's released. Anywhere else that people can go to check you out and learn a little bit more about you and what you do?
Great. Connect with me on LinkedIn for now. And Ashok Manthena, that's how you can find me. Connect with me. And if you have any questions about generative AI, if you want to learn more about predictive analytics, particularly in finance, hit me up. And I'm always happy to talk to.
Perfect. So that's Ashok Manthena, spelt ASHOK for people listening on audio, and then Manthena, MANTHENA.
Right.
Perfect. All right, Ashok, that's been excellent. I really appreciate your time, and thanks for coming on the show. And as I say, I feel like we're only getting started, so maybe we have a round two at some time.
Sure. It's fun, Adam. Thank you. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to talk to all your audience.
No worries at all. Thanks again. Cheers, Ashok.
Thanks. Bye.